Hi, I'm Lorna and welcome back to my channel, Thread and Yarn. This is going to be the second episode of Fibre Folk. It's my podcast, which I'm trying to do a couple of times a month, all about folklore, folk tales and crafting. And I'm hoping, and it seemed like some of you enjoyed the idea as well, but that we can make it a sort of online digital crafting circle where we tell stories and discuss them together in the comments and work on our crafts or anything else that feels cozy and you want to do and have this on in the background. So my regular videos about sewing, knitting and natural dyeing are continuing, but this is just a little extra just to help build a feeling of community. And I think telling stories is such a wonderful way to do that. As I said in the last podcast episode, I've always loved folklore, and I think at the core of the word itself, folk is about people, it's about connection, it's about understanding how our communities work and how things that affect our communities happen, and the impact it has on the lives of the people in the tales and those around them. And I really enjoy looking back at the folk history of people, imagining how their lives would have been. I always think this when I look at old houses and I think about all of the lives that have been there before, all the things that have happened, all the highs and lows, the births and the deaths, the sort of light stuff as well as the dark. And I think that's definitely one of the things that appeals to me about folklore. And I noticed that the link with crafting and folklore is quite strong in lots of tales, and I think that's because of the importance of crafts and making historically. And we saw that a lot with the last episode, the 3 spinners. And while we're talking about that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody that joined in on the discussion about the last episode. I wasn't really expecting to have so many of you enjoy it. It's hard to know, isn't it? Well, if it's just you or if other people get it or want to enjoy that sort of thing as well. So thank you so much. And I really enjoyed reading all of your comments. I thought there was a great discussion going on, and there was definitely some points there that I hadn't ever considered that I think were vital to the understanding of the tale. So I wanted to tell you another tale today. It's less directly linked to crafting, but I thought of it because I was thinking about knitting, as I often am. So it's a tale about a coastal community in rural Wales. I've been thinking lots lately about the coast. I think I've been wanting to go there. My family, although not from the coast, some of them originate from Wales, and I've been visiting it more and more, especially as I'm not too far away now. Where I am, and I went to Cardigan Bay in May, and I've been going back to different parts of Wales a lot since then, and I've become very interested in Welsh folklore and folklore of coastal communities generally. And separately, I was also thinking about knitting my partner a sort of traditional sort of Guernsey or fisherman's rib jumper. We do lots of bits outside, we're always on our allotment. He would definitely appreciate a nice sort of thick, robust jumper. So I've been doing a bit of research into traditional jumpers made in the British Isles. Knitted jumpers or sweaters, depending on where you're from, have got a really strong association with the fishing communities of the British Isles. Lots of us have heard, I imagine, of the Guernsey or Guernsey sweater. They'd often have individualised elements that the women or family members of the fishermen or sailors would weave into the jumpers to help identify them. And not only were they warm and keep them slightly cosier and could often be fairly bleak weather, but the natural oil that you can find on sheep's fleece could act as a natural water repellent. Not if you ended up in the water, then the jumpers probably wouldn't help you very much, if might actually hinder you. But the idea was that in the sort of cold and the rain they would keep your loved one cosy. Knitting was a huge part of these rural coastal communities. As a result, we have amazing photos of people working away on jumpers and stockings from the sort of Shetland Isles. And also there's fishing nets. Now, fishing nets were handmade until the netting machines were invented, and sometimes this was done by the fishermen themselves, and certainly repaired by them too, and by all the members of their family. So working with fibres was essential for survival and life, and also your livelihood. So this got me thinking about coastal communities and their sort of associations with knitwear and also with folklore. Coastal communities, the British Isles, have a rich folklore history, perhaps because it was quite a difficult and perilous life. Folklore can often be used to make sense of the senseless, and the sea is unimaginably destructive sometimes, as well as providing a livelihood for these towns. It could take everything away, and it's a provider, but it's also a force of absolute destruction. Now, today, I've been thinking about all of this and tying it in together, and I've been doing lots of research about these coastal communities, about the knitwear, and about the difficulties that they faced and the tales that they told to help them make sense of this. And today I wanted to tell you a story from Cardigan, or known as Ceredigion. It's on the west coast of Wales. It's a very rural part of Wales and it's part of the rugged Pembrokeshire coastline. I posted a video about my trip there in May as part of Me Made May. I'll link you to it. It was so beautiful and had such a rugged, almost violent coastline. It had these craggy rocks and the sharp gorse flowers and the sort of icy blue-grey waves constantly smashing against the rocks. But also absolutely wonderful rolling green hills with woodland and small farms and beautiful little stone cottages. This juxtaposition of the quaint against the fierceness of the elements just really captured my imagination. And I think it's definitely something to bear in mind when you're picturing the set of this tale. It's about a small fishing community that lived right on the edge of the coast, just north of Cardigan Bay, in the tiny, it's called a village, but it sounds more like a hamlet, of Llanina. It's a story about a mermaid, the mermaid of Llanina. So while I tell this tale, why not grab your project or just sit back and relax, whatever you want to do, and have a listen. I'm working on this Icelandic jumper that I was working on last time. I finished the body and I'm now onto the sleeves, which I'm excited about because I find sleeves boring. I think a lot of people find sleeves boring, hence Sleeve Island, which is on theme for today's episode. And while I am stranded on Sleeve Island, I am dreaming of starting the yoke, which is my next step. So this is the second sleeve and I'm going to join it to the body and then I'm going to start the beautiful Icelandic yoke, which I've also realised is going to have crabs on it, so it just feels perfect. Very, coastal themed Icelandic jumper. So I'm just going to be working on this, going round and round. I've done all my increases now, so bring whatever project you want. Sit back, or settle down. And as I said last week, light a candle and get cozy, and I'll tell you the story of the mermaid of Llanina. So there are many stories of mermaids from Llanina, but this one just set a seed in my mind, I guess, and started growing and twisting and sending off lots of different branches of thought. So I chose it for this reason, and I hope you enjoy it too. So there are mermaids, not just in Llanina, but there are mermaids in folklore throughout so many different cultures, through Europe and Asia and Africa. Clearly, they are an idea that's also landed itself in the consciousness of people throughout the ages. And what's interesting is that mermaids often appear in moments of perilousness or peril. You can often find them at the critical moments, either right immediately before or during the events themselves. And those events can be storms or shipwrecks, people on the cusp of drowning. And why are mermaids so associated with this life or death sort of situation, this feeling of overwhelming and destructive nature, and also of sexuality? So let's set the scene. We spoke a bit about Cardigan and the Pembrokeshire coast, but Llanina beach itself, north of Cardigan, it's a partly sandy, partly stony type of beach. It's got craggy edges, it's got beautiful caves and craggy hills that lead up to wonderfully green, luscious, rolling Cardiganshire countryside. And in these nooks and crannies, you can see how the locals could have been scavenging over the beach, looking in rock pools, finding their way through the caves. It's just perfect for the imagination. But it's also a place where the community lived and died. The beach is where the fishermen would come in, where they'd bring their livelihood back to the village. They'd bring the fish they'd been catching, what would feed their families. But also it's the place where people would look out, wondering if their loved ones would return. The place where many people drowned or were lost in shipwrecks and in storms. It's both a giver and a destroyer. But right now it's a fairly quiet beach that I really recommend going to visit. Cardiganshire really is just phenomenally beautiful. So this story was originally told by a lady called Myra Evans. She was born at midnight between the 1st and 2nd of November, 1883. Now, for those of you who like spooky tales, you might know that this is the night of All Souls. The night after Halloween, when the veil between this world and the otherworldly realm is at its thinnest. Now, Myra was a lover of fairy tales. Her father was a fisherman, and she gathered up so many wonderful coastal folklore stories. And quite charmingly, she kept them in a box, in a tin, underneath her bed, and would read them at night when her father was away. This story of the Llanina mermaid is one of my absolute favourites, and I'm very grateful for Myra for recording it, and so we have it with us today. So back to Llanina. Llanina was the beach set at the bottom of some rush fields, flatlands of Llannon, and Ogof Dupin, Ogof in Welsh meaning caves and coves. There was a little farm, a poor farm, called Tangulin, and on it lived a widow. Her name was Nidan, and her son Risen. They both earned their living from the sea. So Risen was a fisherman. He would go out on the boats and he would bring back herring that he'd caught in the nets that he and his mother had made. And his mother would salt the herring and she would sell it in the village. In Myra's tale, she tells us how the seals of Llanina were always chewing away at Risen's nets, and he had to mend them, and he would spend endless amounts of time fixing all of these holes that the seals would just come and tear back open again. Now, Risen himself sounds like he was a fairly attractive guy. He had dark curly black hair, and he's described as having slow black eyes. I love that, slow black. It gives me a hint of purpley blue, of that rich but also sort of dusky colour that you get from sloes, opulent. And I can really visualise that, and I can see how he'd be quite enchanting. Not just his eyes, he is a good singer too. He would sing and rhyme and tell stories, and for this, all of the girls loved him. And it said in the version that I've read that quite a few of their mothers, and even one, and I quote, lusty old grandmother loved him too. Now, unfortunately for all of them, Ritten was engaged to Lowri. It said that all the women of Llanina had dark brown curly hair, just like Ritten himself. But Lowri, she's from the south of Wales, and she had hair that was spun of gold. She had big lips and she was beautiful, and Ritten loved her. They were engaged and they were due to be married on the next Gul Mabsant. This is a festival a traditional festival in Wales. It celebrates the feast of the patron, or the patron saint of the parish. It would go on for several days, and it was a time of great festivity and joy, and all the villagers would be in high spirits and celebrating their bounty with each other and singing and dancing. So it's a time of joy, and why not hold your wedding at the same time and be a part of that celebration. So this is when they were due to be married. Now Ritten, as I said, was an excellent singer and beloved in his community for that. And one day when he was mending all the holes in his nets made by those naughty seals, he was sat in the caves on Llanina beach, working away at the fibres to fix the mesh of his nets, when he noticed a young woman. She was sat on the rock not far from him. She had shocking red hair, but in it were limpets and crabs and seaweed, all tangling around. Her hair was wild but beautiful, and her hair tumbled down her back, and in the light of the fading sun, Ritten could see that the way the shadows fell below her waist was odd, and then, to his surprise, he realised he was looking upon a mermaid. The shadows formed the start of her tail, where there should have been legs. There were fish scales. Ritten was absolutely enchanted by her beauty and her strangeness. Her tail shone like quicksilver and was covered in goose barnacles and little crabs and seaweed tangled all around. And he said to her, "Beautiful lady, can I help you?" She stopped combing her hair and turned around to look on him. "Teach me the song you sing of the beautiful girl with spun gold hair. You sing it whenever you're mending your nets, and I listen to you each night." I love that song. I would love to learn it. So Ritten came closer. He said, "I'll teach you that song, but tell me your name." "My name is Morwen," said the mermaid. "I am the daughter of Nefus, king of the deeps." So Ritten began to teach her the song. He sang of the girl with spun gold hair who lived in Llanina, but he didn't tell her who this girl was, that she was real, or that she was soon to be married to him. He came closer, and Morwen was enchanted by his song, so much so that she flushed with embarrassment and said, "No more tonight, but I'll come back each moonrise and I want you to teach me more of the song until I've learnt it completely." So Ritten agrees, and Morwen slips beneath the dark waves and into the night. So each moonrise, Ritten came back. He was distracted all day. He was just thinking about the night when the light fell and he saw that shock of red hair again, and Morwen was back in the coves of Ogoftúpan, and he could teach her more of his song. And as he sang, each night she fell more and more in love with him, until one night, when the song was nearly finished, Morwen declared herself to him and said that she loved him and that she wanted him to come down to meet Nefus, come down to the kingdom of the deep and live with her forever. Now, Ritten, realising that he couldn't just flirt every moonrise and get away with it, panics. After all, he does love Lowry. She's beautiful and he quite likes living on the land and doesn't really like the idea of being dragged down deep into the dark ocean. So he panics a bit. He tells her of Lowry, says he's engaged, and he was just teaching her a song, nothing more. Morwen wailed and cried, and she said, "You'll regret this. My father, he'll take your lands for his own, and he'll avenge this insult." Rhysn went home. He became withdrawn. Lowry thought he was no longer interested. She thought, oh, it's just another guy who's going to pretend he's interested in me, string me along, and then leave me at the last minute. His mother also thought he was getting cold feet about the wedding. But Rhysn was frightened. He was terrified of the curse that the mermaid had put on him. But the day the wedding came around, the sky was full of primrose, violet and campion. And Rhysn went down to the Llanina shore, and there he saw Morwen, her red hair shocking in the morning light. And she said to him, "If you go to Llanina church today, if you step one foot inside there, then my father will take vengeance upon you. He'll punish you, your bride, and you'll all be drowned." Now, Rhysn had to be dragged to the church by his mother. But as soon as he saw Lowry, beautiful in the church, she was so lovely, he thought, she is the only one for him. And maybe if they were together, everything would be okay again. So in he steps, his foot over the threshold. And as soon as he does, the beautiful pastel sky turns to stormy grey. Thunder outside, lightning. The waves are lashing at the shore, breaking against the rocks of Llanina Bay. He realises at once what he's done, but it's too late. Morwen's curse is exacted. A large wave rushes over the shore, flew through Llanina beach, over Ogof Doipen, through the small holding, through the rushlands and up to the church. The large wave drags him out, over the lands he grew up in, down to the shore. They say there was a woman with bright red hair who wrapped her arms around him and carried him off to the sea, dragging him down to the deep. As Rhysn disappeared into the dark, nobody else in the church was as lucky either. The waves came bashing through. As they huddled in the church, the waves lashed at the stone walls, breaking through the church doors. And all of the villagers and wedding guests of Llanina, of Ogof Doipen, were drowned. And as Rhysn's lungs filled with cold, salty water, his legs began to turn into a tail. Where there was once skin, there were scales. And Morwen took him down deep to meet her father Nephis in the land of the deep. They say that in Llanina Bay, if you're there today, and each Gulmabsant, you can hear the church bells ringing, distant and dark at the bottom of the deep, dark blue ocean. Except they're not ringing for Lowry. They're ringing for Rhysn and Morwen, their eternal wedding. And that is the story of the Llanina mermaid, as recorded by Myra Evans. A kindred spirit, I feel, another lover of folklore. So, what do you think of this tale? My first thoughts are, it's about the sea. The sea is unpredictable and dangerous. It's a provider. It gives them their livelihood, but it can also destroy everything. I mean, these villagers would have been used to losing people regularly to the sea. It was almost a way of life, accepted, but I imagine no less difficult. just for knowing that it was possible. Perhaps this is an example of using folk tales to explain unimaginable, unprocessable horrors, or even just everyday losses. There's also an element of mystery, of alluring danger. No matter how well fishermen thought they knew the sea, there's always a deep unknown. What lies in the dark beneath the waves? What happens to those dragged down to the deep? I also think there's something here about the fear of female beauty and sexuality. Often we see in literature and in history, it's viewed as innately destructive and tempting, which ultimately leads to a demise. There are other stories where sailors have come across mermaids and they've either treated them with respect or they haven't. Some have even captured them, including in Llanina. Some have captured them and brought them back to their bathtubs at home to do, I don't know, want to know what with, but it certainly is not treating them with respect, and for that they are punished. Sometimes the punishment is fertility-based as well. There's one story where this fisherman does just that. He kidnaps this mermaid, who brings her back home, despite all of her protestations, keeps it in his bath, and then she curses him with lifelong and all of his family to have no fertility. And I find that interesting, that there's like a sexual element there, but then I think there's the other element is the fact that it's linked to survival and productivity, and the fact that your family made up a big part of your livelihood, and if you were left on your own, if you had no children to look after you or to continue working, you're kind of doomed. So I think there's a couple of different elements to that, but what is interesting is that fishermen who help a mermaid or who let her go, they're treated not with a curse, but with a reward. Often the reward is, I'll let you know when there's a storm coming, when something might be dangerous and could take your life. There's one story in Llanina where this happens. This was a fisherman called Peregrine from St Dogmaels. He was pulling in his nets when he saw a mermaid combing her hair. He caught her and she began to weep and asked him to release her. And she said she would give him 3 shouts if he was ever in danger from the sea or from storms. When he released her and she disappeared back into the sea, one day he was out fishing in his boat and the mermaid said to him, 3 times, you must haul in your nets, you must go. And he sailed for home. And as he arrived, this huge storm gathered from nowhere, but he was safe. Unlike 27 other fishermen that day, it was October the 1st, 1789. We see this ritualistic shouting, 3 shouts. I always think when I hear things like this, perhaps it's an element of it being an oral tale, and it helps remember and tie things together. We see that in this tale as well, with the sky being primrose, violet and campion. Patterns of 3 come up all over in folklore and in oral tales. But the ritualistic nature as well, perhaps it represents the need to find patterns in madness. And mermaids aren't the only watery women we see in folk tales along the coast. We also have ladies of the lake, sirens from Greek mythology, and selkies. Something else about this tale which I find interesting is that Rissam goes to see Morwen at moonrise. This is something else I've noticed a lot in folk tales and folklore generally, is these moments of change. So day turning into dusk, twilight, seasons at their turn. They're liminal moments in the year. It seems to make it more likely that you'll have an otherworldly encounter. They're moments where the veil is thinnest. This can be lucky or it can be very unfortunate for you. It seems to depend what tale you're in and how you behave in it. And I wondered why mermaids are so popular a tale at Llanina. And when I was in Pembrokeshire earlier this year, I heard that dolphins can often be seen around the coast. And I wondered, is there some link there? I know that dolphins have often been linked to mermaids sort of historically and in tales, but the fact that they're often playing and feeding just off the coast, perhaps it encouraged some of these tales. What do you think? I'd love to hear what you thought of this tale. I think there's so much more that could be said about it. It's hard to know quite where to begin. There's so much rich folklore about coasts and mermaids and watery women. It's hard to know where to begin, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I hope you liked this tale. It's one that really stuck with me. I think Rhysn obviously isn't as truthful as he could be from the beginning. He doesn't say anything about Lowry until it's too late. He's kind of having his cake and eating it. And I think traditionally in folk tales, that sort of behaviour is punished. He does lead Morwen on. Does he and his whole village deserve to be drowned? Possibly not. But often the punishment is disproportionate in folk tales. But this is some of the heaviest punishment I've seen across all of the mermaid tales. But perhaps there was some historic disaster, and this was a way of explaining how it happened, without history being noted down officially or rigorous accounts being made. It was all hearsay passed on from generation to generation, and maybe this should explain it. And it's also a warning about how dangerous the sea is and the hidden dangers that lie within it. And also sort of keeping to your own and not straying, not being too tempted. Again, a very common theme in folk tales. So this tale has a lot more traditional folktale elements than the one I told last time, where Sarah is not punished for lying, but as we've discussed in the comments, there could be many other reasons why she has the outcome that she does. So I'd love to hear what you think about this one. I think there are so many things that I hadn't thought about in the last tale that you all brought up, so I really value your insights on this one. And I hope you find it cosy and comforting to hear a little tale while you're working on your craft or just relaxing. I am really hoping to do these sort of once or twice a month, aiming for once a fortnight, but sometimes life happens. I'm also doing more and more research about them and trying to find out more about their areas that they originated in, the different people that have written about it or have told these tales before, and similar tales that have all fed into the culture of the story. So I hope you liked the fact that there was a bit more research and a bit more history to it. Let me know what you think. I'm enjoying them, so I'm going to keep on making them, but I always love to hear your feedback, and I definitely try to take it on board. So thank you for joining me for this tale of the Llanina mermaid, a little Welsh folk tale told originally in Cardiganshire. I'll be posting some more videos soon as we come up to autumn, both Fibre Folk videos and some about my autumn and sort of late summer capsule wardrobe. So check those out as they come. I'm definitely going to do some more spooky ones as the spooky Halloween season approaches. They shan't be too terrifying. It'll still be sort of cozy horror at most. But I just wanted to say what's on my mind and what I'm hoping to work on next. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and hopefully we'll talk there. Bye.